Alright guys, so we're putting together the rotator, attaching it to your transducer pole. Now it's going to come to you fully assembled. I put these together and it's going to come ready to go. The reason I put it together like this is number one, for shipping, to keep it safe, and number two, so I'm pointing right there to the J hooks on the front. That's where your cables are going to attach. That'll drive the rotator. And here you can see that metal sleeve that goes around it. That protects the plastic underneath from the cables as they're pulling back and forth to rotate your pole. And right there in the middle, that's what's going to grip onto the pole. So you're going to tighten each side of this thing one at a time to get it even on either side. And it's going to just kind of pinch down on the pole so that it'll sit right on your transducer pole so you can rotate it back and forth. Things you're going to need: needle nose pliers. I do not supply those. Grab some pliers. I do give you this. I made this specifically for this purpose. I had a hard time with this build, putting these things together. It kind of drove me crazy a little bit. I said, I'm not putting my customers through that. So I made that hollow nut driver for you guys and a hex key. I'm going to supply that also, just in case you don't have a hex key laying around. But the pliers is the only thing you'll need as far as your tools go. You don't have to have pliers, but it's going to make this a lot easier. Where I'm pointing right there, that's where you're going to want to install this thing, close to the base of your transducer pole. Really, let's pause right here. So I'm going to pull up a picture here of my setup, how I have this rotator on my transducer pole when I'm actually fishing. You can ignore the tape and rubber bands and stuff I have on there. I was playing around with some different ideas. But the placement of the rotator is what I want you to pay attention to on this. You can see the reason I'm placing it so low is because you see that clamp beneath there with the cables? That's what's going to steer your transducer pole. It's cables that are going to pull from one way or the other. Well, if you put this thing up too high, the cables are going to slip off of that metal sleeve and it won't work correctly. You need there is some play there. You can see the small ram mount. That'll give you a little bit of leeway. So if you put it too low, you can adjust that ram mount down, up a little bit. But if you put it too high, the ram mount won't be able to reach it and it won't work properly. So make sure you get it pretty low, like as close to your arm, whatever you're using to connect your transducer pole to your boat. You want the rotator fairly close to that. I'd say maybe 4 to 6 inches off of the arm would be perfect. Just play around with that placement. If you don't get it right the first time, just loosen it back up. Maybe even keep your sleeve off of the rotator until you get the placement right and you're happy with the placement. Just a thought there. But anyway, that's a picture that shows you where I have mine. So, all right, let's move on to the next step. Okay, so we talked at length about how to place the rotator on your pole. Here's how you're going to disassemble it. So these J hooks are what's holding tension on this metal sleeve. Be careful when you take these off. The sleeve could have some tension on it. It could pop loose and potentially give you a cut. Maybe wear gloves or and some protective goggles while you're taking this thing off, just to be safe. It shouldn't be too much tension, but you can never be too safe there. Alright, so after you loosen these up, you don't have to take them all the way out. Just loosen them to where you feel like you could slide that sleeve back under there if you need to, because you will need to after you place this thing. So you're going to slide that sleeve off of there, just like that. And just set that to the side. You'll need it as one of the last steps. Alright, so looking inside of these, yeah, right there, you can see the bolt coming through, and it's got the nut on this side, and on the other side is where the hex key is going to go. So that's where your hex key is going to go into to loosen this up. Yeah, use the hex key and loosen that up. You'll have to use the hollow nut driver on the other side. That's why I made this thing. It's hard to get pliers in there or anything else. So again, I made this specifically to make this part easier because I had a heck of a time doing it before I made that thing, and I didn't want to put you guys through the effort of trying to get fingers or pliers in there. So, anyways, you got this tool and it'll help a lot. So when you loosen this, you're gonna loosen one side all the way. You don't have to. Um, if you have a pole like mine, you could take your handle off and just loosen both sides up enough to get the middle over that, and you could slide it over. If you don't have a removable handle or you don't want to remove your handle, then I'm going to show you what to do here, because I didn't want to remove my handle. My handle was lined up right. I didn't want to take it off and put it back on, and anyways. So I'm going to show you the other way, which is a little more tricky, but it's not that. I mean, you're just taking a bolt out and tightening a few bolts back up. So again, you're gonna take this one out. Let's use some video magic to show you. What you're gonna wind up doing here is taking one completely out, and then the other one you're gonna loosen it up halfway or more, maybe a little more, but don't take the other one all the way out. So leave one in but loose, and take one all the way out. Let's fast forward to that part. All right, so you got one of the bolts out. You have one of the bolts loosened. Don't lose the bolt. So just set it somewhere off to the side. So you've got one out, one loosened, and you're gonna want that one loosened enough to where you can slide this thing over your pole and then push it back together. So it's you kind of see what you're gonna be doing there. The pole's gonna be in the V part of this. And so the reason you don't take both of them apart is just because you don't have to. You could if you wanted to, but take my word for it, it's harder to get those to go back together if you take both of them out. It's trickier. You have to kind of hold at the same time as you're trying to screw the nut. Anyways, I put this thing together for you guys to make this easier, as easy as possible. Anyway, I know this part is a pain. You only have to do this once. This rotator only has to go on once, and you never have to mess with it again. It can just stay on your transducer pole all the time. It won't hurt a thing. So you see where I'm putting this. I'm lining it up right there on the transducer pole, close to the bottom. And then you're going to turn this to where both sides are right there. Now here's the part where one side might, that gap, like between those, you want the gap on either side to be the same. So if you see one is bigger, like right here, this one's bigger, I'm going to loosen up that other side. I'm going to take my hex key and I'm going to loosen that other side up so that the gaps are as close to the same as you can get them. One thing I want to mention here, do not over tighten. Tighten it down, get it snug to where it won't move. Kind of hold the pole and try to move the rotator. Make sure it's not like moving, like sliding around too much. But it doesn't take much effort to move this thing, so don't over tighten it, because you could damage the plastic, you could damage maybe your pole. So just get it snug enough to where it doesn't move around, but don't go crazy with the tension or tightening this thing down, because you can break the plastic on the rotator, or you could damage your pole. All right, there's your bolt that you've taken out, and here you're finally going to use the needle nose pliers. The only thing you're going to use them for is, unless you have very small fingers, it's hard to get this bolt to go back in that hole unless you use pliers to thread it through. Again, you don't really have to have these pliers, but it makes this part much easier to get that bolt to go threading through that hole. So after you get that in there, you're going to tighten it back up with your nut driver and your hex key again. Again, do not over tighten. This thing doesn't have to be, you're not trying to hold plates together in a helicopter or anything. You just tighten it enough to where it's going to be snug, and it's got rubber grips on the inside. It doesn't have to be too tight. That rubber is not gonna slip too easily. So just snug it down where it won't move around whenever you go to rotate it. And make sure your gaps are the same on either side. And here's a quick look at the end product before we put the sleeve on. How your gaps the same on either side. It's snug but not over tightened. Here's the part where you can stop right now and make sure this is in the correct position for the wire guide to be able to get your wire in the right position. So maybe put this on your boat and try to get the wires to go over to it before you put your sleeve on. Alright, now that you're sure it's in the right position and that your wire guide can feed the wire to it, go ahead and it's time to put the sleeve back on. Alright, so come around there. You don't want to bend the sleeve too much where you're doing this. Try to keep it, as in that loop as you can so that it'll kind of stay under tension and wrap around easier. Pro tip, turn it upside down so that the washers will kind of dangle. It makes it easier to slip the wire sleeve under that. So just like I'm doing right here. So slide it under there, push it till it's tight, and try to keep it under tension. You're going to hold it with your hand, kind of hold it down to keep tension on both sides, just like I'm doing right here. My thumb on one side, finger on the other side, and then you're going to tighten those bolts down. And you want the J hooks to be angled up. So after you get your bolts tightened down and snug, then you're going to adjust the J hooks to turn them up. And I'll show you what it should look like right here. Now, one other quick note, you'll use your pliers here also. So get it as snug as you can with your hand. Then give it maybe a half turn or a full turn with your pliers just to tighten that nut up enough to where it's going to hold that metal sleeve in. This is nothing critical. The sleeve is only there to keep the plastic from being scarred underneath it from that wire. If it slips, if the sleeve pops open or something, just retighten it. It's not going to break your device or anything like that. So just here's how I do it right here. I just kind of tighten it down enough to where I feel like that sleeve's not going to go anywhere, and then I turn that J hook back up just like it was when you guys received it. Like I said, you should be getting it fully built. Just kind of put it back the way that it was, and here's how you do that. Some of you guys may have a better method than this or more tools. I'm showing you how to do everything with only needle nose pliers that you have to pull out of your toolbox, but you may have better tools to do this stuff with. And there it is. There's the finished product. Your rotator is now on your transducer pole. The hardest part of this whole thing is done, and this is by far the hardest part. Everything else is going to be much easier than this and won't require any tools. Alright guys, and if you're watching this and you purchased the Foot Fisher, I want to say thank you to everybody for buying it. I built this for us, for fishermen, to make our days on the water better. So thanks everybody.